Hey guys, tonight we drift into the soft, dusty glow of an Egyptian sunrise, and you step right into it as though your feet already know the ground. The sky is still bruised with the last purples of night, and the Nile glimmers like a slow-moving sheet of hammered copper. You're waking up on a reed mat that crunches faintly every time you shift. A thin linen sheet clings to your skin, still cool from the night breeze slipping through the mud brick walls, and before you even fully sit up, you already feel it. The weight of the day waiting for you. The tasks lined up like little silent judges. You probably won't survive this, at least not with modern expectations about breakfast in bed and 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there, Egyptian sunrise or midnight in your room. It all mixes nicely with stories like this. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up, brushing off a few flakes of dust, because yes, even in the ancient world, dust is basically a roommate. Outside, roosters crow like they're auditioning for a very aggressive choir. The air smells faintly of earth, Nile water, and the smoke that lingers from last night's small cooking fire. Before the rest of the house wakes, you take a breath of stillness. Egyptians believed dawn belonged to the goddess Hathor, the bringer of joy and feminine power, and you can almost imagine her stretching across the sky, painting it soft gold for you. But you get exactly 5 seconds of that spiritual moment, maybe 6 if the kids are still asleep, because the first of your daily survival tasks arrives immediately, getting up before the sun fully breaks the horizon. Most ancient Egyptian women woke early to keep ahead of the heat. Historians still argue whether people rose before dawn because it was cultural habit or because chores simply didn't fit into the day otherwise. But either way, you're already moving, your body switching into autopilot, your mind reminding you of everything waiting for you. Grain to grind, water to fetch, fires to coax, linen to weave, and yes, at some point, maybe a moment to breathe. You step outside, and the ground is cool enough to walk barefoot. You stretch, feeling that familiar ache in your shoulders from yesterday's grinding stone. A quirky tidbit. Ancient Egyptians didn't really have the concept of a day off unless it was a festival, and festivals often required more chores because you had to prepare special food and offerings. So congratulations. Your vacation days are actually extra work days. But at least they came with music, dancing and beer, which, let's be honest, does soften the blow. The street around you is just beginning to stir. A neighbour pushes open her door, nodding at you with that mutual unspoken acknowledgement of, yep, we're up before the sun again. She has the same sleepy face as you. You're basically twins in exhaustion. She asks lightly if the rat stole any of your barley last night, and you laugh, because if you don't laugh, you might cry. It's one of those moments where community becomes your caffeine. As the light increases, the mud brick walls of your home shift from grey to warm terracotta. You tighten the linen strap of your simple dress, already feeling the fabric warming to the air. Linen is your constant companion, cooling, breathable, and surprisingly fancy if you weave it well enough. A mainstream historical fact: Egyptian linen was so valued that wealthy families kept stockpiles as inheritances, sometimes more precious than metal jewellery. Meanwhile, your humble household has just enough to stay clothed and patched, and that means later today you'll be at the loom again, weaving thread after thread after thread, the rhythmic work that fills the afternoons. But right now you begin the earliest ritual of all, checking the household. You move through the tiny rooms, stepping over sleeping kids, ducking under hanging baskets, straightening a pot that threatens to roll off a shelf. No doors with privacy locks here, just curtains and habits. You glance into the small animal space. Your chickens murmur softly, still waking. A goat bleats once, annoyed you're late for, well, something. Goats are always convinced you're late for something. In these first moments, everything depends on your ability to stay ahead of the heat. By midday, the air will thicken into something like hot clay soup, so you mentally group your tasks. Fire prep before the sun rises too high, water fetching before crowds gather, grain grinding before the children need food in their mouths. It's a choreography you've memorized over years. As you step outside again, the sun finally edges up, a thin, sharp band of gold slicing over the horizon. It glints across the river, lighting up patches of reeds where small birds flicker in and out. Fishermen are already on the water, silhouettes casting nets with practiced motions. You watch one for a moment and think about how your life and their lives weave together through the crops, the markets, the seasons, the floods. Everything circles back to the Nile. Ancient sources called Egypt the gift of the river, but honestly it can feel like the landlord who charges rent in sweat. Your mind drifts briefly to the annual inundation, the flood that brings fresh silt and life. Historians still argue whether women participated directly in farming during all eras or just in certain periods, but what they do agree on is that women controlled many household decisions about food storage. You're the quiet economist of your home without ever hearing the word economist. A breeze ripples across your face, lifting the ends of your hair. You close your eyes for a slow moment, not a meditation, not a break, just a breath before the machine of the day begins. A tiny joke leaves your lips. Maybe today will be easy. Even the chickens seem to scoff. You pick up the first tool of the day, a small basket. It's nothing special, woven reed, slightly fraying, but it's yours, shaped by your hands and years of use. The weave rubs gently against your palm, textured, familiar, grounding. This simple moment, this simple tool feels like stepping into a story that's been told for thousands of years by women who woke before the sun exactly like you. And just like that, the day truly starts. You move into the cool shadow of your home where the grinding stones wait for you like old, heavy co-workers who never call out sick. The quern sits low to the ground, 2 slabs of stone, one flat and steady, the other shaped to fit your hands. You kneel, settling into the posture your body knows too well. Your knees sink into the packed dirt floor, and for a moment, you're reminded that ancient Egyptian women basically invented leg day without ever stepping foot in a gym. Lucky you. You pull the small basket of barley beside you. The grains whisper against each other. Dry, light, a faint earthy smell rising as you pour a small handful onto the lower stone. In this moment, you can almost pretend the world is quiet. But then you start grinding, and the rhythm immediately takes over. Forward, pull back, forward, pull back. The stone rumbles softly, the grains crackle beneath the pressure, and thin dust puffs into the air, coating your fingers and creeping into your nose. Congratulations, you're now inhaling the same fine flour dust that probably caused dental issues for centuries. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians had worse teeth because of sugary treats, or because grinding stones left microscopic grit in daily bread. Either way, the dentist isn't coming. The movement is slow, steady, hypnotic. Your arms warm quickly, muscles waking the way a cat stretches into sunlight. It's not glamorous, but it's grounding. Literally and metaphorically, this is the work that feeds your family. A mainstream historical fact. Women did most of the grain grinding across nearly all periods of Egyptian history, and it remained one of the most time-consuming tasks in the household. Some researchers estimate that women spent several hours a day bent over a quern just like this. So the next time someone complains modern chores are tiring, you can quietly laugh from 3,000 years in the past. You add another handful of grain, spreading the kernels evenly with your fingertips. The grinding resumes, a gentle scrape that becomes the soundtrack of the morning. Your breathing finds a steady pattern. Every few minutes you pause to brush off the flour collecting at the edges, gathering it into a small clay bowl. The smell of fresh flour is oddly comforting, warm, nutty, like the promise of bread that will appear hours from now when your stomach is loudly negotiating its survival. You shift your weight slightly, stretching your back as the first signs of sunlight slide across the doorway. You're not alone in your early morning effort. You can hear distant grinding from other homes, tiny echoes through the village. This shared struggle almost feels communal, like everyone is playing the same slow, repetitive percussion instrument while the Nile hums back up. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. Egyptians used bread for everything. Food, offerings, payments, even beer making. Beer wasn't just a fun drink. It was liquid nutrition, thick and mildly alcoholic. And yes, before you ask, kids drank it too. It was basically the ancient version of healthy, fortified chocolate milk, but with a buzz. So the flour you grind now might become breakfast, lunch, or a batch of small beer brewing quietly in a corner jar. Your arms provide the carbs of the entire household. A child stirs behind you, rubbing sleep from their eyes and shuffling across the room. They plop down beside you with the energy level of a slightly wilted lettuce. You give them a soft smile, still pushing the top stone forward. They don't say a word, just sit and watch, occasionally tossing a stray pebble out of the grain basket with great seriousness. Congratulations, they are helping. Time stretches as your pile of flour grows. The soft brushing sound becomes almost meditative, though you still manage to slip in a quiet joke under your breath. Imagine if we had a magic machine that did this in seconds. The universe responds only with more grinding. As you work, you think through the day ahead. Water from the river, the fire to spark, the loom waiting for you later. Every task has its own rhythm, but this one anchors them all. Grinding is repetitive, yes, but it's also symbolic, your contribution to survival in the most literal sense. You stand briefly to stretch your legs, brushing flour dust from your dress. A faint cloud rises, catching the sunlight and turning golden for just a heartbeat. It's beautiful, in the way ordinary things sometimes surprise you. Your neighbour passes by the open doorway, waving a greeting. She's carrying her own basket and gives you a sympathetic grin that says, "Yep, grinding again." In some ways, this is the social glue of early morning. No group chat, no coffee shop, just flour-related suffering. You kneel again and finish the final round. Long, smooth pushes, gathering the last fine powder. You lift the small clay bowl and weigh it in your hands. Not much, but enough for the first batch of dough. The simple act of standing after grinding feels like unlocking a new level of soreness. Egyptian women were basically doing CrossFit centuries before CrossFit, minus the headbands and motivational playlists. You gather the tools with practiced ease, tapping the stones together lightly to shake loose the last dust. As you set them aside, you already know you'll return tomorrow and the day after, and every day after that. Bread is life here, and life is work. Before stepping outside, you take one more look at the flour bowl, soft, pale, and ready. It seems small, but it's a reminder that every morning here begins with effort that no one writes poems about. Yet without it, nothing else in the household would function. You breathe out slowly, steadying yourself. Another task complete. Another thread in the long, quiet fabric of your day, and already the next one is calling. You step out into the morning light with your empty clay jars, the ones you've carried so many times you could probably balance them in your sleep. Considering how tired you are most mornings, you may have already done that at least once. The Nile is still catching the early glow, shimmering with soft ripples that promise a little peace before the world heats up. Fetching water again, you mutter under your breath, as if saying it softly might make the jars lighter. Spoiler, it doesn't. You adjust the strap on your shoulder, gripping the coarse rope that keeps the jar steady against your hip. The pottery is cool for now, chalky beneath your fingertips. Later, once the sun climbs higher, it will feel like carrying a small, angry oven. So you start walking at a quick, steady pace, the dirt path warm but not yet scorching. A few neighbours join the slow parade toward the river, women of every age, each with their own water jars and their own quiet morning thoughts. There's something comforting about this silent companionship. Not quite a social event, but not entirely lonely either. As you walk, the smell of the river grows stronger. Fresh in some places, muddy in others, with hints of marsh plants and the faint musk of animals who visited earlier. You pass a few goats tied near a fence, bleating as if they're offended you didn't greet them personally. A sleepy donkey stares at you with the deeply judgmental expression donkeys have perfected over centuries. You give it a nod as you go by. It does not nod back. Donkeys never do. By the time you reach the water's edge, the sun is fully rising, casting a path of gold across the water. Fishermen row silently, silhouettes framed against the glowing horizon. Birds dart across the surface, catching insects in quick flashes. This could be a peaceful moment, if the jars weren't about to make your arms feel like wet noodles. You crouch near a shallow spot, careful of slippery mud. You dip the jar into the water slowly, letting it fill without stirring up too much silt. The water glugs happily into the clay container, and for a brief second you imagine it saying, "I'm going to be heavy now. Good luck." This is the moment every Egyptian woman negotiates with herself. Do you fill it all the way and suffer the carry home, or only fill it halfway and have to come back again? Heavy now, or heavy later? Truly the ancient version of choose your pain. Today you choose heavy now. Future you will thank you. Probably. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind as you lift the jar. Many Egyptian homes didn't have wells or internal water systems, so women made multiple trips to the river every single day. Water was needed constantly, for cooking, drinking, cleaning, brewing, washing, and sometimes even for rituals. Historians still argue whether carrying water was exclusively women's work or if children shared the load during certain periods, but the artwork and records strongly suggest that women bore the brunt of this task. No gym memberships, just Nile trips, every day, maybe twice, maybe 3 times. Truly the original endurance training. As you rise with the full jar, your shoulders immediately protest. The weight presses down through your spine, your hip tilts just slightly to compensate, and your grip tightens instinctively. This is where experience matters. You don't fight the weight, you flow with it, letting the momentum guide your steps as you turn back toward home. You pass a group of youths splashing in the shallows, laughing loudly enough to make the birds scatter. Part of you envies them. Another part of you thinks, if they get water in your clean jar, you will personally make them grind grain for a week. This is the mental toughness of an Egyptian woman, compassion balanced with highly specific irritation. Halfway back, you pause under the shade of a large sycamore tree, feeling a slight breeze cool your neck. These trees are sacred to Hathor, symbolizing protection and nourishment, so resting beneath one feels like a small blessing. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some Egyptians believed sycamore trees could house spirits who whispered guidance to women in need. Today, the only whisper you hear is your own shoulder saying, maybe stretch next time. Then you resume walking, determined but steady. Your sandals press into the dirt, leaving small patterned impressions that will vanish by evening when more feet follow the same path. Your dress brushes softly against your legs. Your jar creaks faintly with each step. Pottery has its own language, and you've learned to speak it. By the time you re-enter the village, the world is fully awake. Children run between homes, a dog naps dramatically in the middle of the path, and someone is already complaining loudly about their goat chewing through a basket again. You nod sympathetically. It's never if a goat eats something, it's when. You reach your doorway at last, shifting the jar carefully to set it down without cracking it. The moment it touches the ground, your shoulder releases tension you didn't know you were holding. You straighten slowly, rolling your neck, letting the muscles sigh with relief. The cool water inside the jar sloshes gently, as if pleased with its new temporary home. You dip a finger inside, testing it. The water is clear, clean enough, for cooking and drinking. For a brief second, a flicker of pride warms your chest. This is ordinary work, but it is foundational. Without this water, nothing else in your day could happen. You wipe your hands on your dress, take one more breath, and glance around the quiet home. The fire needs tending, the dough needs mixing. The day is only beginning, but you've already carried the weight of survival, literally. And now, the next task calls your name. You crouch beside the small fire pit just outside your doorway, eyeing it the same way a tired parent eyes a stubborn toddler. It's early enough that the air still holds a hint of coolness, but you know it won't last. Soon the sun will glare down like a relentless supervisor with no sense of personal boundaries. So this is the moment, the race to coax the morning fire into existence before heat, chores, and small children all compete for your attention. The ashes from last night lie in a soft grey heap, faintly warm like they're pretending they did nothing wrong. You stir them gently with a reed stick, hoping to find a little ember still alive. If you do, your day gets easier. If not, well, prepare to spend a few extra moments whispering sweet nothings to a pile of sticks like some kind of ancient pyromantic poet. Your hand brushes away the top layer of ash, and there, yes, one tiny coal glows faintly, just waiting for attention. You smile. It's the ancient Egyptian equivalent of finding an extra snack in your pocket. You lean close, cupping your hands around the ember as you blow softly. Warmth expands under your breath. The ember brightens, glowing orange-gold like a miniature sun trying its best. You add a few thin, dry twigs, precious little things, because, despite what modern people imagine, Egypt does not exactly overflow with wood. Historians still argue whether fuel shortages in certain periods pushed households to use more dung, reeds, and leftover plant matter. But what they do agree on is this: wood was far from casual. You pile the twigs carefully, blowing again. Smoke curls up, lazy and aromatic, carrying that subtle mix of earth, warmth, and the faint scent of the reeds. The flame catches, then grows, then shifts from shy flickers to confident dancing. "There we go," you whisper, like a proud parent whose child finally ate their vegetables. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Egyptian cooking fires were often small, low to the ground, built either inside a courtyard or right beside the home. They didn't usually roar like modern campfires. They smouldered in controlled, efficient ways, because fuel was scarce and days were long. You were expected to cook multiple meals on something the size of a stubborn candle with confidence issues. You place a few thicker sticks on top, not too many. You need them to last. You adjust the clay pot stand, that simple tripod that supports your cooking vessel. You straighten it with practiced motions. Everything about this fire is muscle memory. Inside, a baby wails for a moment, then quiets again, probably soothed by a sibling or sheer exhaustion. Children don't exactly respect your fire schedule, but you do your best to coordinate. The dough you mixed earlier is resting in its bowl, a small pale lump that will become flatbread once the fire is hot enough. It's waiting. Everything is always waiting for you. You sit back on your heels, wiping your smoky fingers on your dress. A little streak of soot smudges across your skin. You leave it there. You've long since stopped caring about tiny marks of daily work. It's basically ancient Egyptian makeup at this point. Very edgy, very, I woke up like this and then immediately fought with twigs. Beside you, your small daughter toddles out, rubbing her eyes. She sits down on the ground like she's melting into the earth itself, watching the flame with fascination. You smile at her and gesture her closer so she doesn't lean too near the fire. Kids always think flames are magical. Adults do too, honestly. But adults also know flames are needy and rude and capable of ruining breakfast. A quirky tidbit floats up in your mind as you feed the fire another small stick. Some Egyptian families used incense or fragrant woods during household rituals, intertwining the warmth of daily fire with spiritual practice. Today, though, you're working with very normal fuel, bits of acacia, dried reeds, and a few precious scraps of wood saved from weeks of collecting. Not exactly temple incense, but functional. Still, if the breeze hits just right, you can almost pretend the smoke smells like sweetness rather than survival. The flame grows stronger, and you place your small pot nearby to preheat the surface. The light flickers over your hands, casting soft shadows across your skin. You can feel the warmth on your cheeks, on your forearms, warming the muscles still tight from water carrying. You stay close enough to monitor, far enough to avoid becoming breakfast yourself. Your neighbour walks past and teases, "Fire cooperating today?" You reply, "Barely." And you both laugh because you know the truth. The fire never cooperates. You negotiate with it daily like it owes you rent. You turn back to the pit, nudging a coal with your stick, adjusting the airflow. Simple motions, calming motions. Sometimes this part of the morning feels almost meditative, like the rhythm of grinding grain, like the walk to the river, like weaving linen later. Survival here is built on patterns, but a small part of you remains alert. Fires are both friend and threat. Too little flame, and you can't cook. Too much flame, and your home, your entire world, could suffer. A single spark can undo everything. That underlying tension hums quietly in your bones, even as your hands move calmly through the routine. You add one more small stick and watch as the flame bends upward, licking the edge of the pot stand. The fire is ready. It crackles softly, rewarding your patience. You exhale and sit back slowly, letting your muscles relax for a moment. Another task completed. Another quiet victory in a day full of them. And already you're thinking about the next ripple of work ahead. The fire burns steadily now, its warmth promising the first real meal of the day. The fire crackles steadily behind you as you step back inside your small mud brick home, where the morning light filters in through the doorway and paints everything in soft amber. This is the moment where the day begins to shift gears, from those early morning survival tasks to the endless loop of housekeeping that keeps this entire household from collapsing into chaos. Household chores on repeat, you sigh internally, because yes, repetition is the theme here. Egyptians built pyramids, but everyday life was basically a cosmic remix of the same chores. day after day after day. You grab the palm fibre broom leaning in the corner. Its bristles, stiff from yesterday's sweeping, are already shedding a little. You run a hand along the handle, feeling the worn smoothness from years of use. You begin sweeping the packed earth floor in slow arcs. The dust rises in tiny clouds, catching the beams of light like floating stars. Magical if you imagine it that way, mildly irritating if you want clean air. As the dust settles, you make a mental tally. Sweep floor, shake mats, patch baskets, tidy jars, sharpen knives with a small sandstone, check the oil lamp wicks, reorganize the reed chest. And that's just before the kids scatter everything again. Historians still argue whether Egyptian households followed a strict daily cleaning schedule, or whether people triaged the worst chores depending on the season. But the truth is visible in every archaeological site. Homes required constant upkeep. You move to the sleeping mats first. They lie rumpled from the night, bearing faint impressions of the bodies that slept on them. You lift each one, shaking it outside to let dust and stray bits of straw escape into the breeze. Your arms extend fully, the mat flapping like an oversized tortilla. A stray chicken sees this as a personal challenge and runs beneath the falling dust as if hoping to catch something. Chickens have no sense of self-preservation or dignity. With the mats now fresher, you return inside and kneel beside the woven reed baskets lining the wall shelves. One has frayed at the corner, which is not surprising. Woven baskets are the backbone of your household. They store grain, fish, sweets, herbs, tools, linens, everything. But they're fragile. A quirky tidbit. Despite their simplicity, Egyptian baskets were so well made that some survived thousands of years in tombs, still intact today. Yours, sadly, will not enjoy such luxury. You thread new reeds through the loose weave, pulling each strip tight with a satisfying snap. Next, you check the tools. The sandstone knife needs quick sharpening. You drag its blade across the stone with long, even strokes. The sound is subtle, gritty, and familiar. It's oddly soothing, like the quiet shh of a librarian telling you to calm down. Once sharp, you tuck it back into its slot on the shelf. You open the reed chest. Inside are folded linens, everyday dresses, children's wrappings, a few nicer cloths reserved for festivals. You unfold one to look for tears. A small rip along the hem greets you like a tiny mocking smile. You pinch it between your fingers. Of course, you mutter. You again. You sit, pull your sewing needle from its clay case and begin stitching. Your fingers move with practiced precision. Over, under, pull tight. Threaded linen becomes a seamless line again, as if the tear never happened. While you sew, you hear chatter outside. Neighbours greeting each other, the marketplace already warming up. You catch a moment of gossip about someone's goat sneaking into someone else's vegetable plot. In a village of interconnected lives, privacy is basically a myth. But community is strong, and sometimes loud. You shift to the oil lamps next, checking the small clay bowls shaped like shallow boats. The wicks lie in small curls. You trim one, rethread another, then top off each lamp with a little more oil. These lamps will carry you through the evening hours when sunlight disappears and your night chores still demand attention. A mainstream historical fact. Despite their simplicity, Egyptian oil lamps were crucial for household tasks and even religious rituals. They weren't bright, but they offered just enough glow to keep a home functioning after sunset. Every household, even modest ones like yours, relied on them daily. As you tidy the jars, you tap gently on the sides to check for cracks. Pottery is a blessing until it breaks. Then it's insultingly useless. You find one jar with a thin new crack near the rim. You sigh. You'll have to use it only for dry goods now, no more water storage. Jar retirement happens early in this climate. Behind you, your smallest child has wandered in and is now dragging a broken reed across the floor, creating a perfectly straight line through your freshly swept dirt. You pause, watching the destruction unfold at toddler speed. You take a slow breath. A very slow breath. Great job, you say gently, because it is too early to battle chaos. The child beams proudly. You sweep the line away again once they scamper off. You return to the shelves and pick up a small wooden spoon, a tool you carved months ago. Its handle is slightly chipped. You sand it down with a shard of stone, smoothing the rough edge. Tools speak to you in a little ways. A chipped handle tells you someone used it carelessly, or maybe dropped it in a hurried moment. Everything in this home is handmade, fragile, and precious. So you care for it the way you care for the walls, the children, the food, the fire. You pause for a moment, leaning against the wall. You feel the cool mud brick against your back. In the stillness, you think about something scholars debate. Whether Egyptian women viewed these chores as burdens or as expected rhythms woven into life. Some argue women took pride in mastery. Others argue exhaustion was common, though unrecorded. You personally lean toward both. Pride and exhaustion can coexist. They often do. You stand again, shaking out your hands, brushing flour dust from your forearms, even though you know you'll acquire more soon enough. The house is cleaner now, calmer now, more functional. Children wander back in. Your oldest daughter inspects the newly patched basket like a tiny quality control inspector and nods approvingly. You smirk. Outside, the fire still burns. Dough waits in its bowl. Animals need checking. The Nile breeze drifts in softly through the doorway. Another chore finished. Another layer of calm added to the home. And just like that, you step into the flow of the next relentless task. You step back outside into the warm glow of late morning, and before you even cross the threshold, a small whirlwind of children barrels toward you like a stampede of tiny, sticky, emotionally unpredictable gazelles. Children under your watch, you think. Not as a complaint, not as a celebration, just as an undeniable reality. They are everywhere. They are loud. And they are your responsibility from sunrise until your eyelids begin plotting mutiny. The first child tugs at your dress to show you a beetle. The second is arguing with an invisible friend about who owns a stick. And the third is dangerously close to the fire pit doing absolutely nothing helpful. You swoop in with the reflexes of someone who has saved many lives from clumsy doom and gently redirect them to a safer patch of shade. Children in ancient Egypt didn't have toys in the modern sense, but they had energy and imagination, which is either beautiful or terrifying depending on the level of supervision available. A quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have found little carved animals, dolls made of cloth, and clay balls children probably rolled or threw around the courtyard. But most of their entertainment came from doing what children always do, copying adults, bothering adults, or escaping adults. One child picks up a small reed broom and pretends to sweep just like you did earlier. Another mimics your stern, "Don't you dare," look at the toddler edging toward the chickens. You smirk. Miniature versions of yourself might be the most chaotic form of flattery. You kneel to speak eye level to the toddler, gently redirecting their attention to a safer activity, stacking small pottery shards into a tower. Is it sharp? Yes. Is it dangerous? Slightly. Is it the safest option available right now? Debatable, but toddlers are magnificent hazard seekers. You cannot eliminate danger. You can only steer them toward the less pointy variety. From the corner of your eye, you notice your older daughter helping braid another child's hair. Egyptian hairstyles for children often included the distinctive side lock, the side lock of youth. A mainstream historical fact. That side lock wasn't just a cute style, it symbolized childhood itself. Boys and girls wore it until adulthood, along with shaved or partially shaved heads, to keep them cool and less lice-prone. You glance at your daughter's hair with a hint of pride, neatly braided, well-maintained despite the dust, and the wrestling matches that happen daily. You gather the children to give them small tasks. Yes, childcare here includes delegating tiny chores that are both practical and strategic. You hand one child a small pot and ask them to fetch herbs from the garden corner. You give another a piece of linen and say, "Wipe the jars gently." Will they wipe them gently? No. But the jars will survive. Probably. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian mothers had formal systems for teaching skills or if learning happened entirely through imitation. Judging by the way one child is pretending to weave reeds badly, but enthusiastically, it's safe to say imitation was the primary school of the day. You correct their hand position with a soft touch. "Like this," you whisper, guiding their fingers. Your middle child appears with a tear in their dress, freshly acquired from climbing somewhere they should not have been, and denying it with the bold confidence of a crocodile wearing a wig trying to pass as human. You inspect the tear. It's fixable. Everything is fixable, except the lies children tell, which are enormous and unbreakable. You sit them down and begin stitching the tear with a thread you kept tucked in your dress. Their small feet swing back and forth in the dust, Their eyes wander, following a chicken with intense fascination, clearly planning mischief. You gently hold their chin to keep them still long enough to finish sewing. Once the repair is done, you send them off to play beneath the sycamore tree, where shade provides both safety and containment. You scan the courtyard, child here, child there, one climbing, one singing, one rolling in dust like a very small, cheerful boulder. Parenting here isn't about perfection. It's about watching for patterns of disaster and staying one heartbeat ahead of them. You gather the children again for a short lesson disguised as a game. You show them how to knead a tiny ball of dough. Your oldest finds the rhythm quickly. Your youngest smashes theirs like they're interrogating it. This is fine. Everyone learns at their own pace, and dough recovers. A soft breeze brings the smell of the Nile along with the faint echo of women chatting near the edge of the village. Children pause, tilting their heads, listening. They always notice voices, especially the dramatic ones. You settle onto a reed mat, letting a few of the children sit in your lap or lean against you. One brings a stick and starts writing in the dirt. Egyptians used reed pens and ink for real writing, but children practiced in more playful ways. You draw a rough symbol, an eye, representing protection. They giggle and copy it, though theirs looks more like a confused fish. It's adorable and slightly alarming. You think about something scholars often mention. Children were vital in everyday labour. They herded animals, fetched small items, helped grind grain, carried messages, and learned trades early. They weren't passive observers. They were tiny apprentices. You give your eldest a basket of herbs to sort. They take the task seriously, brows furrowed in concentration, picking out wilted leaves with surgeon-level precision. The midday sun begins to press down harder, so you guide the children inside for a rest. Egyptian homes stayed cool thanks to thick mud brick walls, and stepping inside feels like entering a giant clay refrigerator. Well, a mildly cool one with no snacks. You hand out small cups of diluted beer or sweetened water. Yes, kids drank beer, not strong beer, nutritional beer. The ancient equivalent of a smoothie, except it tasted like grain and mild tang. One child wipes their mouth dramatically like they're tasting fine wine. You raise an eyebrow. Finally, you coax them onto mats for a short rest. Not a nap necessarily, just a settling. A moment when their bodies stop moving long enough for your brain to catch up. You hum softly, tracing shapes in the air with your fingers. For a few blissful minutes, the world becomes still. Just the sound of children breathing, the gentle cluck of hens outside, and your own heartbeat slowing to a calm rhythm. You watch over them like a vigilant guardian, knowing that the peace may last 2 minutes or 20, and you'll adapt either way. Because in this world, motherhood is both anchor and storm, love woven into labour, chaos wrapped in tenderness. And when the children blink awake again, the day continues without hesitation. The children drift back into their lively orbit, and as they scatter into the sunlit courtyard, you slip quietly toward your loom, the towering wooden frame that takes up half the room and more than half your patience. Weaving that never ends, you murmur, brushing your fingertips along the hanging threads. The linen strands sway faintly, almost like they're greeting you, or warning you that you're about to spend several hours hunched over, squinting and questioning your life choices. The loom stands tall despite its simple construction. 2 sturdy beams, a warp of tightly stretched threads, and a weighted bottom anchoring everything in place. Linen weaving is not glamorous. It's repetitive, slow, and unforgiving. But it is also essential. A mainstream historical fact. Linen was the most widely used fabric in ancient Egypt, preferred for clothing, bedding, bandages, sails, and even certain forms of writing. And women, everyday women like you, were the primary weavers. Your hands created the cloth that kept families dressed, temples supplied, and markets stocked. You sit on the low stool beside the loom, adjusting the position of the shuttle, a smoothed piece of wood wrapped with thread. You inhale, and your lungs fill with the faint scent of flax fibre. The air tastes slightly earthy. The threads feel cool and dry as you roll them gently between your fingers. Your first task is to tighten the warp. You lean forward, pulling the vertical threads evenly, adjusting the tension just enough to avoid sagging. Too loose, and the cloth will warp. Too tight, and your arms will hate you forever. You find the perfect balance, a whisper of drum tightness that sings when plucked. You begin weaving. Over, under, over, under. The shuttle slides through the warp with a soft wick, followed by the gentle tap-tap-tap of your fingers pressing the weft into place. It's a rhythm so familiar your body could do it without your mind, which is convenient because your mind is already drifting to a dozen other chores waiting later. The fire outside hisses softly. A child giggles in the courtyard. A goat bleats as if offended by your existence. Life continues while you weave the threads that quite literally hold your family's world together. As you work, a quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Egyptian linen was so prized for its fineness that some weavers produced cloth so delicate it was practically translucent, light enough to pass through the crack of a door. Wealthy families demanded linen with hundreds of threads per inch, meaning weeks, even months, of meticulous labour. Your household can't afford such extravagance, but even your simpler cloth carries centuries of tradition in each line. You lift the heddle rod, separating the threads to make room for the next pass. Your hands move automatically, finding their rhythm like a well-practiced song. The fabric slowly grows under your fingertips. It's satisfying in a quiet, incremental way. The progress is small but steady. Historians still argue whether weaving was done mostly alone or in groups. Some suggest communal weaving sessions where women shared gossip, news and jokes while their shuttles danced. Others believe most weaving happened within each household, a private labour done in pockets of solitude. Today, your weaving leans toward the quiet side, though the background noise of children and chickens ensures you're never truly alone. Your oldest daughter wanders in and watches you for a moment, eyes curious. She touches the woven cloth lightly, feeling the texture change from loose fibres to smooth fabric. You smile at her and guide her small hand to the shuttle, teaching her the first careful pass. She beams with pride. You remember being her age, learning from your mother, hands trembling with concentration as you tried not to tangle the threads. She lasts about 30 seconds before announcing she's bored and wandering off to chase a butterfly. Fair enough. Weaving is a long-game skill. You return to your work, letting the loom pull you into its slow rhythm again. Each section of cloth you complete brings its own tiny reward. A neat edge, a perfectly straight line, a soft sheen when the sunlight catches it at the right angle. The cloth grows steadily, row by row, like pages filling with silent writing. You pause to stretch your back, pushing your shoulders back until they pop with quiet relief. Weaving is deceptively physical. Your arms ache from lifting the heddle rod, your wrists strain from guiding the shuttle, and your lower back, well, it's plotting revenge. This is why Egyptians were strong, you whisper to yourself, not from lifting stones for pyramids, from making linen. The threads tangle slightly at one corner, and you sigh because this always happens the moment you hit your stride. You pluck at the knot delicately, teasing the fibres apart with the tenderness of someone diffusing a tiny bomb. After a few slow breaths, the knot gives way. A small victory. A quiet sigh of relief. Outside, laughter erupts as one of the children attempts to imitate a market seller shouting "Fresh figs! Very fresh! Maybe too fresh!" while waving a twig. You smile. Their world is noisy and chaotic, but your weaving forms the calm centre, a place where your hands know what to do even when your mind doesn't. You finish another section of cloth and admire the growing panel. Smooth, even, functional. Not temple quality, but good enough to become a new tunic, a headscarf, maybe a cushion cover. Every household needs linen, and every linen piece begins exactly like this. Thread by thread, hour by hour, patience layered over patience. A faint breeze drifts in from the doorway, cooling your skin. The linen fluttering on the loom sways gently as if nodding. Approval, encouragement, or maybe just the wind telling you you're halfway through the day's weaving. You place the shuttle down and inhale deeply. Your fingers hum with the lingering vibration of work well done. Another stretch, another exhale, another task connected to the long chain of survival. And somewhere in the weave of cloth, in the tiny spaces between the threads, your quiet strength has been stitched into the fabric of daily life. Soon enough, the marketplace will call. By the time you step away from the loom, the room feels warm with the growing afternoon heat, and your shoulders remind you that weaving is absolutely a sport, just without the cheering crowds or shiny medals. Outside, the village hums with a different kind of energy. Voices rise and fall, footsteps scatter, animals complain loudly about absolutely nothing. It's time for your midday market shuffle, the daily pilgrimage to the bustling heart of the community where survival meets social life. You grab your small woven basket, its repaired corner holding steady thanks to this morning's patchwork, and step onto the sunlit path. The air vibrates with warmth, carrying scents of fish, herbs, dust, and something faintly sweet you can never quite identify. Maybe dates, maybe figs, maybe something you should have bought earlier but forgot. Again. As you approach the market square, the world expands into sound. Sellers call out from every direction, advertising their goods with voices that could wake mummies from their linen naps. Fresh tilapia, fat tilapia, barley cakes, still warm, pottery, only slightly cracked. It's lively, chaotic, and, let's be honest, louder than your children arguing over a beetle. You weave your way through the crowd, basket held close to avoid collisions. A mainstream historical fact. Marketplaces were essential hubs in ancient Egyptian towns. Women were not only buyers, but sellers, traders, negotiators, and carriers of community news. Transactions weren't always about money. Bartering was common. A little honey for some herbs, a figs for onion exchange, pure economic poetry. You stop first at the bread stall. The baker, a woman with arms as strong as granite and a voice 3 sons louder, greets you with a grin. Morning or noon? Time is fake. You laugh and ask for 2 small barley loaves. She hands them over warm, the smell rich and comforting, the crust firm but promising softness inside. You trade a small bundle of dried mint for the bread, a fair exchange. She tucks the mint into her belt and launches into the latest news. Someone's goat escaped again. Someone dropped a jar of oil. Someone claims to have seen a crocodile statue wink. You nod politely. Markets are where gossip evolves into mythology at alarming speed. Next, you make your way to the fish seller. He's standing beside baskets of Nile fish, freshly caught and still shimmering faintly. The smell? Potent. Very potent. But the taste later? Worth it. You pick a modest fish and he wraps it in reeds. You trade a handful of lentils. A good deal. Both of you leave feeling victorious. A quirky tidbit flashes in your mind. Fish wasn't always eaten daily. Depending on the region and social class, some people avoided it for religious reasons, believing certain fish carried divine associations or divine warnings. Historians still argue whether fish taboos were regional, symbolic, or seasonal. You, personally, just hope this one tastes decent when grilled. You continue through the market, stopping at a pottery stall. The potter, a wiry man with clay permanently living under his fingernails, displays a row of freshly fired bowls. One catches your eye. Smooth, sturdy, uncracked. You need it. But you also know bargaining is part of the dance. You tilt your head, purse your lips, and give a look that says, "This bowl is nice, but I've seen nicer." He counters with a smile that says, "No, you haven't." You snort. The game begins. After a few playful exchanges, you trade a strip of woven linen and a handful of barley for the bowl. A good bowl, a durable bowl, a bowl that will probably be broken by your toddler within a week, but you allow yourself optimism. As you move toward the herb sellers, you nearly bump into an elderly woman carrying a stack of reed mats. She steadies herself and gives you a warm smile, the lines on her face deep like ancient hieroglyph inscriptions. She asks about your children, offers advice you didn't ask for, and gives you a sprig of dried chamomile, claimed to help with headaches, sleep, and stubborn husbands. You thank her sincerely. You reach the herb stall where fragrant bundles of rosemary, mint, fenugreek, and coriander sway in the breeze. You inhale deeply and feel your shoulders relax. Herbs are your medicine cabinet, your spice rack, your beauty kit, your everything. You choose a few bundles, nothing extravagant, just enough to flavour the evening meal and maybe soothe a cough or two. The herb seller mentions a rumour. Someone found a serpent skin near the riverbank. You shrug. Could be a good omen, could be a bad one. In Egypt, symbolism is everywhere, even in laundry piles. You finish your rounds with a final check at the grain seller's stall, not because you need more today, but because grain prices shift like moods. Better to stay informed. He tells you that this year's barley looks promising. You nod, grateful. Good harvests mean fuller bellies, and fewer late-night worries. Your basket now holds bread, herbs, fish, a new bowl, and, somehow, a handful of wildflowers one of your children shoved in earlier. You don't question it. Parents learn to accept random plant deposits without complaint. As you turn to leave the market, you take one last look at the bustling square, the swirl of voices, colours, smells, and lives intersecting. A living tapestry, a moving mural of survival. Historians still argue whether markets were as central for women as they were for men. But standing here, basket in hand, surrounded by faces you know and trust, you feel the answer settle deep inside you. Without women, this market doesn't run. Without women, half these trades don't happen. Without women, the entire system collapses. You head home through the sunlit streets, the basket pulling slightly at your arm. The fish swings, the bread warms your side, and the flowers bob cheerfully with every step. And just like that, the midday shuffle ends, and the next task quietly steps forward. You place your market basket on the cool floor of your home, and as you unload bread, herbs, and your proudly won pottery bowl, the familiar scent of fenugreek and mint rises into the air. It mingles with the lingering smoke from the morning fire, creating a soft herbal haze around you. This is your cue, the quiet transition into one of the most important parts of your daily routine, medicines from mud and plants. Because in the ancient world you don't get to call a doctor, you're the doctor, or at least you're the first responder, the pharmacist, the herbalist, the comforter, and the one responsible for ensuring everyone stays healthy enough to keep surviving. You kneel beside your small wooden box, the closest thing you have to a medical cabinet. Inside are tiny packets of dried herbs wrapped in linen scraps, a jar of honey, a small bowl with residue from yesterday's poultice, and a few items you wouldn't brag about but absolutely depend on. You start by sorting the herbs you bought at the market: mint, chamomile, coriander, fenugreek. You spread them out on a flat basket to dry before storing. Your fingers brush each leaf lightly, crushing one between your fingertips to release its aroma. It smells sharp, bright, and soothing. You inhale deeply and feel your shoulders relax. A mainstream historical fact filters into your thoughts. Ancient Egyptians were some of the earliest practitioners of medicine, and much of daily healthcare was performed by women. While professional physicians existed, some even highly trained, every household relied heavily on women's herbal knowledge for illness, pain, fevers, and injuries. Many remedies were written on papyrus scrolls, but just as many lived only in memory, passed from mother to daughter in kitchens and courtyards. You pick up a small jar of honey, the most beloved ingredient in your supply. Honey is a treasure here. Sweet, medicinal, antibacterial. You dip your finger inside and swirl it slowly. This jar will serve a dozen roles: soothing sore throats, dressing small cuts, flattening stubborn coughs, bribing children into cooperating, and probably calming an irritated neighbour or two. Honey is the ancient Egyptian equivalent of just drink some tea and rest, except it actually works. Then your gaze falls on the more unconventional remedies. And yes, this is where things get interesting. You reach for a small clay pot containing something dark, grainy, and earthy. Mud from the Nile mixed with herbs, used for bee stings, swelling, and mystery rashes. A quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Ancient Egyptian women also used crocodile dung. Yes, crocodile dung, as part of certain fertility treatments and contraceptive mixtures. You give your pot a suspicious look. Today's batch does not include crocodile dung. Small victories. You hear a soft cough behind you. Your youngest child, eyes watery, nose running slightly. Perfect timing. You reach for the dried chamomile sprig the elderly woman gave you earlier at the market. You crush it gently and drop it into warm water to steep. The steam curls upward, fragrant and calming. "Drink," you say softly, handing the cup over. The child sips, makes a face like they've been personally betrayed, and then accepts another sip. You stroke their hair, feeling the warmth of their small forehead beneath your palm. As they settle down, you check the family's small store of medicinal oils. You lift a jar of castor oil, thick, sticky, and strong-smelling. Used for sore muscles, headaches, and bad winds, whatever that means. Historians still argue whether castor oil was primarily medicinal or cosmetic. since Egyptians used it for everything from massages to eye treatments. You have personally used it for both, though your children insist it smells like a donkey who ate too many onions. You take a small dab and rub it into your temples. The scent is pungent, but the relief is real. Your head, still buzzing faintly from weaving and market noise, begins to ease. The next item in your box is a small bundle of dried willow bark. You break off a fragment, chew it briefly, and feel the bitterness bloom across your tongue. Willow contains natural salicylates, the ancient precursor to modern aspirin. When your joints ache or your head throbs, this is your salvation. You close your eyes as the taste settles. It always works. You pull out your mortar and pestle, a simple stone set worn smooth from years of grinding herbs. You place a few mint leaves inside and crush them slowly, their scent brightening the room. You add flax seeds and grind until they form a paste. This will become a poultice for your husband's aching shoulder or maybe your own, depending on whose muscles complain the loudest after today's work. As you grind, the steady motion anchors you. Over the rasp of the pestle, you hear soft wind brushing past the doorway. The day is warm, but the shade inside cools your skin. You feel the rhythmic pressure of the grinding through your fingertips, a comforting repetition. You pause when you hear a neighbour call your name from outside. She steps into the courtyard carrying her son, who sports a bright red welt on his arm. An encounter with something bitey, no doubt. You examine the mark, not dangerous, just painful. You wipe your hands, scoop a bit of honey mint paste from the bowl and spread it across the welt. He winces, then relaxes. Your neighbour sighs in relief. She thanks you with a small bundle of dates, payment in kindness and fruit. This exchange reminds you of something scholars note often. In Egyptian villages, women's medicinal knowledge created invisible networks of care. Remedies travelled from home to home. Healing was communal, cheap and consistent. You store the rest of your herbs, wiping down the box before closing it. Everything has its place. Everything is prepared. Tomorrow you'll need more mixtures. Next week new oils. Illness and injuries never wait politely. You look around the quiet room. Your child now resting, the jars sorted, the mortar clean. A faint breeze stirs the herbs hanging above your head. The scent fills the air, mint, chamomile, fenugreek, coriander, a small symphony of survival. Your hands smell like plants, mud, honey, and care. Exactly the blend of a healer, whether or not anyone calls you one. And as always, the next task waits just outside the door. You step outside again, letting the sunlight wash across your arms as the breeze carries the faint sounds of clucking and bleating from the back of your home. This is the part of the day that always sneaks up on you, tending small animals, the unsung symphony of chirps, bleats, rustles, and occasional emotional breakdowns, mostly from goats. Animals are both your companions and your responsibilities, and they contribute to your household survival in steady, unglamorous ways. You start with the chickens first. They're already pacing around the small enclosure like feathered philosophers contemplating escape. Chickens in ancient Egypt were surprisingly late arrivals, likely introduced during the New Kingdom, yet by your time they're common enough, pecking, scratching and gossiping with more intensity than your neighbours at the market. You unlatch the small gate and toss a handful of grain onto the ground. Immediately a feathery explosion of activity erupts. Chickens sprint toward the food with the chaotic enthusiasm of toddlers who've spotted sweets. One particularly dramatic hen leaps mid-air as if performing a stunt for an invisible audience. You shake your head. Calm down, it's just grain. They do not calm down. You lift each chicken gently, checking their feet for scrapes, and run your fingers along their wings for signs of mites. One gives you a judgy stare, clucking indignantly. You mutter, "You're welcome," because apparently even poultry can be ungrateful. A mainstream historical fact crosses your mind. Egyptians kept a variety of small animals: goats, ducks, geese, cats, sometimes dogs, and the occasional donkey if they were lucky. Each animal had a role. Goats provided milk, chickens and ducks provided eggs, cats protected grain from rodents, donkeys carried loads. Everything had its purpose in the intricate economy of household life, even if goats behave like agents of chaos. Speaking of goats, you turn to the wooden pen beside the house. Inside stands your goat, your unpredictable, loud, opinionated goat, chewing on a piece of linen you absolutely did not give her. "Excuse me," you say, marching forward. She looks at you as if she's done nothing wrong. You retrieve the cloth from her mouth, now damp and morally compromised, and hang it over the fence to dry in shame. The goat snorts. You reach down to check her hooves. She wiggles dramatically, making the process far more difficult than necessary. You think to yourself that if ancient Egyptians ever had therapy sessions, half of them would be about goats. Historians still argue whether goats were more valued for their milk or their meat, but no one needs to argue about their personality. Chaotic neutral. You guide her out of the pen to graze near the sycamore tree, tying her to a sturdy stake. She immediately tries to chew the rope. She fails this time. Next, you tend to the ducks. Unlike chickens, ducks carry an air of calm, resignation. Waddling quietly to the small basin you keep filled with river water, they paddle happily, dipping their beaks in with gentle splashes. Waterbirds were especially valued in Egypt, depicted in tomb art, poetry, and offerings. Ducks were protein, symbolism, and status rolled into one feathery package. You scatter a handful of herbs into the basin, a little fenugreek and mint to keep the water fresh and discourage insects. The ducks quack approvingly. You smile. Ducks are lower maintenance friends, loyal, predictable, a relief honestly. Then, over near the wall, perched with the supreme confidence of royalty, is your cat. Egyptian cats aren't pets, they're co-workers. Pest control specialists. They stalk mice, chase snakes, and occasionally sleep on your laundry while pretending they invented the concept of sunlight. Your cat flicks its tail as you approach, judging your entire existence. You crouch down and scratch behind its ears. The cat permits this. Barely. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Egyptians loved cats so much they mummified them, worshipped cat-headed deities like Bastet, enacted laws protecting them, and mourned them when they died by shaving eyebrows. You run your fingers across your own eyebrows. You hope your cat lives a very long time. You check the storage jars near the wall. No new bite marks. Good. The cat has been doing their job. As thanks, you place a small scrap of leftover fish near the doorway. They accept the tribute with a dignified nod. Outside the pen, your neighbour's dog wanders over. A skinny but friendly creature who occasionally adopts your family for hours at a time. He sits beside you, tongue lolling, tail thumping. You scratch his head and check for ticks. He's clean. You slip him a crust of bread. He wags once and trots away, his daily visit complete. You return to the goat, who is now somehow tangled in her own rope. Of course, you untangle her gently, muttering encouragement like a frustrated but loving caretaker. She bleats as if she has accomplished something heroic. With the animals fed, checked, and temporarily behaving, you refill their water dishes. You lift the pottery jars carefully, pouring the cool water in slow streams. Ducks drink, chickens sip, goat slurps loudly. Cat pretends to be above all of it. You lean against the fence post for a moment, wiping sweat from your brow. The sun's heat thickens around you, and the air carries the earthy smell of animals, grass, herbs, and clay. This small ecosystem, your animals, your home, your hands, is both fragile and resilient. Historians still argue whether daily animal care fell exclusively on women or if it rotated among family members. But in your world, it's your rhythm, your routine, your tether to survival and stability. You give the goat a last pat. She tries to eat your hair, gather the eggs from the hens, 2 today, 1 slightly cracked, and place everything carefully into your basket. These small contributions will become the afternoon meal, fuel for your family, strength for the evening ahead. As you step back toward your doorway, you glance over your shoulder. Animals wander, peck, graze, and doze. Calm for the moment, managed for the day. You inhale deeply. The scent of fresh hay mixes with the warm breeze. Another essential task done, and the world waits quietly for the next one to begin. You step into the dim coolness of your home again, leaving behind the bleating, quacking, feather-fluffing chaos of the animal yard. The air indoors feels still, almost sacred, as though the walls themselves exhale. This is the quiet part of your day, the part where your work shifts from the physical to the spiritual. Religious rituals at home isn't dramatic or ceremonial the way temple priests perform them. It's gentler, humbler, woven into daily life like another chore but with deeper weight. You cross to the corner where your household shrine sits. Every home, no matter how modest, has one. a tiny sacred space acknowledging the unseen forces Egyptians believed flowed through daily existence like the Nile through the desert. Your shrine is simple: a small wooden shelf built into the wall, a clay figurine of Taweret, the hippo goddess of childbirth and protection, a bead necklace offered long ago, a bit of incense ash in a bowl, and a sprig of dried lotus that's now more crunchy stick than flour. You kneel on the reed mat and straighten the figurine first. Taweret leans slightly, as though she's been listening in on your entire morning and is exhausted on your behalf. Relatable. You gently dust her round belly with a piece of linen. Egyptians believed household gods watched over the family at all hours: Taweret for pregnancy and protection, Bes for joy and warding off evil, Hathor for music and motherhood, and sometimes Osiris or Isis if you wanted extra blessings. A mainstream historical fact. While temple worship was controlled by priests and royalty, most spiritual life happened at home, led by women who shaped family rituals with incense, offerings, and whispered prayers. You place a small clay lamp beside the figurine and add a pinch of powdered incense. Nothing fancy, just crushed herbs from your own stash. When you light it, the flame flickers and releases a thin ribbon of fragrant smoke. It curls upwards slowly, drifting across the shrine like a peaceful sigh. You bow your head. Your voice is soft, barely above a whisper, carrying familiar words spoken by countless women before you. Protect the children. Protect the home. Guide our steps. Keep harm far from us. You pause after each line, allowing the silence to settle. You're not asking for wealth or miracles, just safety, health, and enough strength to get through the day. The essentials. Behind you, the faint sound of your child humming drifts in from outside. It blends with the subtle crackle of the incense. You close your eyes briefly, letting the simplicity of the moment ground you. Then comes the quirky tidbit you can't help remembering. Ancient Egyptians sometimes placed carved hippo figurines under pillows for protection during childbirth. Considering hippos are one of the most terrifying animals on the planet, the irony is very real. But symbolically, hippos represented fierce maternal defense, the kind that would absolutely flatten anyone who threatened your child. You rub Tawaret's carved snout with a tiny smile. Maybe that fierce energy isn't such a bad thing. You add a small offering to the shrine, one of the wildflowers your child stuffed into the market basket earlier. It's slightly wilted but still cheerful. Offerings don't need to be perfect. They just need to be sincere. Historians still argue whether women led these rituals out of tradition or necessity, but it doesn't matter in this moment. You feel the quiet connection to something bigger than you. Your mother, your grandmother, the generations of women who murmured the same prayers while kneeling before similar shrines. It's a private thread linking you to the past. You finish your offering and rise slowly, stretching your knees. The room brightens slightly as a breeze pushes the doorway curtain aside. The incense smoke follows, drifting toward the children's sleeping mats, as though Taweret herself is checking up on them. You move next to the doorway lintel and touch the small protective symbol carved there. A simple "say" sign for protection, a looped rope shape. Many homes had similar amulets woven into the architecture, small charms to guard against illness, accidents, or unfriendly spirits. You trace it with your thumb and whisper a short blessing, keeping superstition close, just in case. Outside, the world continues its noisy bustle, neighbours calling, animals shrieking, someone dropping a jug with a very dramatic crash. But here, inside the cool shadows, time slows. You walk to your water jar and dip your fingers in. With a gentle motion, you flick droplets across the floor. Not to clean, but as a symbolic gesture. Water is life. Water is purification. A tiny ritual of resetting the space. Then you do something small but deeply personal. You sit quietly, completely still, for just 1 minute. A stolen moment. A breath between tasks. A soft inward pause. You don't have fancy meditation techniques, but this silence does what it always does. It restores a little piece of you that chores constantly borrow. After the stillness settles in your bones, you stand again. You check the incense bowl. The smoke has thinned. The figurine watches over the home from her shelf. The ritual is complete, and with it comes the comforting knowledge that even in a world of dust, labour, heat and noise, there is always a place where the divine can settle quietly beside you. You turn toward the doorway, feeling the shift in your shoulders. the subtle renewal that rituals always bring. Because now the heat is rising, the sun is climbing, and survival waits for no one. Time to face the next slice of the day. Stepping out of your home, you immediately feel it. The day's heat rising like an invisible wall that presses against your skin, your clothes, even your breath. Surviving the Egyptian midday sun isn't a small matter. It's a strategic, daily art. Surviving the heat isn't about comfort. It's about endurance, timing, shade, hydration, and occasionally questioning your life choices for living in a place that basically turns into a clay oven every afternoon. The sun hangs high now, bright enough to make the mud brick walls glow. Every surface radiates warmth. The air feels heavy, thick, like someone has draped a hot linen sheet over the world. You squint as you walk into the courtyard, instinctively searching for pockets of shade like a desert fox. The sycamore tree near your house stretches its leaves wide, casting a patch of relief on the ground. You move toward it automatically, stepping into the cooler air beneath its canopy. A mainstream historical fact: Egypt's climate was mostly hot, dry and predictable, and daily life revolved around the sun cycle. Most work happened early or late. Midday was for resting, avoiding dangerous heat stroke and letting the body cool. Farmers paused, artisans paused, even animals sought shade. And women, well, women paused only if the chores allowed it, which was not always guaranteed. You reach for a clay cup, scoop cool water from the large jar, and drink slowly. The water tastes faintly of clay, but it's refreshing. You pour a splash into your hand and press it against your neck. The coolness is momentary but magical. Children cluster beneath the same tree, already looking wilted. One lies dramatically on their back like a fainting princess. Another fans themselves with a broken reed mat. You smile and wave them closer so you can share the shaded patch. But even in the shade, the heat sneaks in from all sides. You feel it radiating up from the earth, rising in soft waves. You tie your linen dress tighter around your waist, knotting it to let more air pass through. Egyptian clothing was designed for this weather. Thin, breathable, quick drying. Even so, sweat beads along your forehead almost instantly. You're not alone in this battle. A neighbour trudges past with her water jar wrapped in damp cloth to keep it cool. Another woman uses her shawl to shield her head from the sun. People move slowly, like shadows drifting across hot sand. You glance at the sky, wishing for a cloud. But clouds are luxuries in this land. The sun dominates everything, a blazing disk of power the Egyptians worshipped and feared. You sometimes think Ra, the sun god, has a sense of humour. Here, enjoy my blessings, in the form of relentless, sweaty character building. And then comes your quirky tidbit of the day. Egyptians use perfumes and scented oils not only to smell nice, but to cool down. Some women placed scented wax, cones on their heads during feasts, slowly melting to release fragrance and moisture. You do not have a wax cone. You do have sweat. It's almost the same thing. Almost. You decide it's time to take the heat battle indoors. The interior of your home is cooler thanks to thick mud brick walls that absorb the sun slowly. Entering feels like stepping into a clay cave, a mildly chilly one. You breathe easier. You pull a woven fan from the shelf. It's simple, just palm leaves stitched together, but incredibly effective. You wave it slowly, letting the breeze skim across your skin. Relief drapes itself around your shoulders like a soft shawl. Outside, you hear the faint hiss of someone pouring water onto the ground to settle dust and cool the air. You repeat the process in your own courtyard, splashing water lightly so the heat evaporates it fast, pulling warmth from the ground. The air shifts slightly cooler. Not much, but enough. Historians still argue whether midday rest was culturally enforced or simply a practical response to the climate. But either way, Egyptians embraced the siesta long before it had a name. A brief pause in the scorching centre of the day was not laziness, it was survival. You gather damp linens and hang them across the doorway. As the breeze slips through them, it cools the air inside, a low-tech, ancient air conditioner, and effective enough that you sigh with relief the moment the air brushes past your face. Your children lie on the mats, whining softly like overheated puppies. You scoop water into shallow bowls and let them dip their fingers or splash their faces. They giggle. For a moment, the heat becomes a game. You sit beside them, fanning gently, watching the patterns of light dancing across the floor. The world slows, even your thoughts slow, drifting like lilting reeds in the Nile current. But the heat always asks for just a little more adaptation. So you reach for one last trick: food timing. You slice a few cucumbers, cool, crisp, full of moisture, and hand them out. Egyptians grew cucumbers along the Nile as a refreshing snack during hot months. The crunch is satisfying, the coolness spreading through your mouth like a tiny fragment of river water. Finally, you settle against the wall, closing your eyes as the fan strokes your cheek. Sweat cools slowly, breath steadies. Outside, the soundscape softens. A donkey brays lazily, someone hums a slow song while grinding grain. A breeze rustles through palm leaves. Midday in Egypt isn't peaceful by accident. It's peaceful because the heat forces everything to soften, to quiet, to settle. Even the sun's power can't push you past your limits today. You've learned to bend with the heat, not fight it. And as soon as the shadow lengthens, the world will stir again. But for now, you rest, just long enough to gather your strength for the next round of daily survival. The shade slowly lengthens as the sun begins its slow, almost apologetic descent from its midday tyranny. The air shifts just enough for you to breathe without feeling like your lungs are sunbathing. This is when your mind naturally drifts back to another constant responsibility, one that's less physical but just as demanding: managing family finances. It sounds modern, but in your world it's woven straight into survival. No ledgers, no coins clinking in leather pouches, just careful tracking of goods, bartering power, and daily decision-making that determines whether the household thrives, struggles, or accidentally starves because someone traded all the onions for a goat blanket. You sit near the doorway with your new pottery bowl, a purchase from the market earlier, and begin sorting through the items you've collected over the day. Bread, herbs, a handful of dates from your grateful neighbour, a fish wrapped in reeds, the eggs you gathered from your hens, and a modest pile of barley. You place everything on a reed mat in neat clusters. This is your inventory, your silent money, the tangible measure of your household's well-being. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. In ancient Egypt, women held surprising financial power. They could own property, initiate divorces, manage inheritance, and conduct business independently. Many households were economically steered by women, not just because they handled daily supplies, but because the law recognized their ability to negotiate, trade, and hold assets. You might not think of yourself as an economist, but you certainly act like one. You run your fingers through the barley, feeling its cool, dry grains slip between them. Grain is the foundation of nearly everything: bread, beer, porridge. But it's also currency. A neighbour needs grain, you can barter. You need linen thread or another pot. Grain is negotiation fuel. You carefully pour some into a jar for immediate use, some into a sealed pot for storage, and a small amount into another container reserved for trade. Your system isn't fancy, but it works. Next, you check your oil supply. The clay jar is less than half full. You sigh softly. Oil is precious, not just for cooking, but for lamps, body care, rituals, and medicine. You swirl it slightly, watching the golden sheen move. You'll need to barter for more soon, but not today. Today you plan. You scan your cloth supplies next. The panel you wove earlier hangs neatly, drying from its final stretching. Linen is valuable, more valuable than many realize. A quirky tidbit: linen was often used as a form of currency or tax payment. Some households paid workers or temple dues in linen rather than grain or goods. The more finely woven the linen, the higher its value. You run your fingers along the fresh cloth, feeling a swell of pride. That panel could become a garment, or become a bargaining chip. Decisions, decisions. Your children wander in with curious eyes. One sits near you and begins sorting the dates into groups based on size, thinking they are helping, when in fact they are inventing ancient mathematical chaos. You smile anyway. Sorting anything counts as assistance at this point. You take a small stick and begin drawing simple marks in the dirt, the closest thing you have to bookkeeping. 3 marks for bread, 2 for herbs, 1 fish, 1 handful of dates, 1 new pottery bowl. You draw a circle around the items you intend to save for the upcoming festival. Festivals mean offerings, special foods, and gifts. Planning ahead is essential. Running short during a festival is like showing up to a feast with no shoes. Not forbidden, just embarrassing. Outside, you hear the rhythm of a distant hammer. Someone is repairing a door. Another neighbour haggles loudly with a passing trader. You listen closely to the shouted numbers and sarcastic remarks. They tell you the going rate for onions today, the value of goat cheese tomorrow, and the current gossip about someone's cousin who supposedly found a gold bead while digging near the river. Economic data mixed with entertainment. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian households practiced formal budgeting or if women improvised each day. But the truth lives in routines like yours. Quiet counting, portioning, and strategizing. You don't need parchment to know what's missing or what needs replenishing. You feel it in your hands, smell it in your jars, see it in your children's meals. You lift a small jar of dried lentils. It's nearly empty. You mentally run through your bartering options. Could you trade extra eggs? Possibly. Could you offer assistance weaving for a neighbour in exchange for lentils? Definitely. Or you could wait until tomorrow's market. But tomorrow will be hot and crowded, and your goat might eat something important again, demanding your attention. You sigh. Being the household's financial officer isn't glamorous, but it's yours. Your oldest daughter sits beside you, watching you move goods from jar to jar. She begins to imitate your motions, transferring imaginary goods between imaginary containers. You laugh softly. One day, this will all be your job, you tease. She groans dramatically, already mastering the art of financial dread. You pull the fish from its reed wrapping and examine it. Firm, fresh. It should be cooked tonight. You mentally adjust your ration plan, 2 loaves for dinner, herbs in the stew, cucumber slices for cooling, 1 egg saved, 1 eaten, dates for dessert if the children behave. Unlikely, but hope springs eternal. Then you tally in your mind what must be saved for tomorrow. You count silently. Bread, grain, oil ration, herbs, cloth piece, and, yes, the new pottery bowl must be protected at all costs. You glance at your toddler across the room. They look at the bowl. You look at them. They nod slowly. You narrow your eyes. The silent battle for the bowl's survival begins. A soft breeze drifts through the room, stirring your hair and shifting a few grain kernels on the mat. You brush them back into their pile, unwilling to lose even a handful. Every grain matters. Every egg matters. Every herb sprig has purpose. You sit back, finally resting your hands on your lap. You've reorganized food, supplies, and trade goods. You've planned meals, rationed ingredients, and mapped out future bartering. Invisible math dances behind every move. Numbers woven into survival. Financial management isn't written on papyrus scrolls in households like yours. It lives in the jars, the baskets, the careful eye of a woman who must hold a dozen tiny calculations in her head at once. You rise, feeling a small sense of order restored, a small sense of control held gently in your palms, and with your goods counted and your mind clear, you turn toward the hearth again. Dinner won't make itself. You head back toward the courtyard, where the afternoon light has softened from blistering to merely aggressively enthusiastic. The fire from earlier has died down to warm embers, perfect for cooking. This is the part of the day when your entire family's energy wavers on a knife edge between pleasantly hungry and tiny riots incoming. Feeding a household in ancient Egypt is equal parts planning, creativity, rhythm, and strategic negotiation with ingredients that never quite behave the same way twice. Welcome to Meals for a Hungry Household. You kneel beside the fire pit and add a few small sticks, coaxing the embers back to life. A warm glow pulses beneath the ashes. The flames rise slowly, stretching upward like they're waking from a very lazy nap. You smile and grab the flat piece of pottery you use as a cooking surface. It's worn smooth from years of dough, heat, and scraping. You set it gently over the fire and wait for it to warm. Your basket of ingredients sits beside you. 2 barley loaves, the fresh fish from the market, mint and coriander, the eggs from your hens, lentils left over from last week, and a few cucumbers for cooling. Simple food, humble food, food that requires work to become anything resembling a satisfying meal. You begin with the dough. Barley dough is dense, sticky, and sometimes temperamental. You sprinkle a little flour over it, carefully because flour is precious, and knead it until your hands ache. The clay surface beneath your palms grows warm. Your fingers move with practiced precision, pressing, folding, rotating. The dough fights you slightly. barley always does. Wheat, the rarer grain, behaves better, but barley is the grain of everyday people. Barley is the backbone of your household. A mainstream historical fact: bread was the central food of the ancient Egyptian diet. Not a side dish, not a carb option. Bread was the meal. Egyptians ate it daily with onions, fish, lentils, and beer. Wealthier families might enjoy more variation, but in modest homes like yours, bread was your loyal and sometimes stubborn companion. You flatten the dough into round discs and place the first one on the hot pottery surface. It hisses faintly, the fire crackles. A savoury, earthy aroma begins to rise. Soon your courtyard smells like warmth and comfort. Your youngest child wanders over, drawn by the smell, and sits too close to the fire. You gently nudge them backward before you accidentally cook a child instead of the bread. With the first loaf cooking, you turn your attention to the fish. You unwrap it from the reed mat and rinse it in a small bowl of water. The scales glisten like tiny shards of silver. You sprinkle crushed herbs, mint, coriander, and a touch of salt over the fish. A simple seasoning, but perfect for the grill. You place it beside the bread, letting the skin crisp in the heat. The aroma deepens, the fish crackles, and you can already imagine your family leaning over their bowls later, savouring each bite. Fish is a luxury, even if it's a modest one. You treat it with care. Meanwhile, the children begin drifting closer. They're attracted by the smell the way bees are attracted to lotus blossoms, or the way goats are attracted to things they shouldn't chew. You hand each child a task. One fans the flames gently, another fetches a clay bowl, another arranges the herbs. Do they perform these tasks well? Debatable. But giving children responsibilities during meal prep keeps them from reenacting battles, climbing fences, or starting small fires. Just to see what happens, you flip the bread. It puffs slightly. Perfect. The second loaf joins it on the heat. You press them down with the edge of a wooden spoon, watching steam escape in quiet bursts. This is when a quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Egyptians sometimes made beer bread, a strange but delightful hybrid dough containing yeast from brewing. The result? Bread that tasted slightly sour and fluffy. You've tried it once. It was delicious. But the children dropped half the batch into the dirt, so today you're sticking with the reliable kind. Next, you prepare a lentil stew. You pour the remaining lentils into a small pot, add water from your earlier trip, toss in chopped herbs, and set it near the fire. The lid rattles softly as the stew begins to bubble. Lentils are filling, protein-packed, and cheap. Any ancient Egyptian mother who didn't serve lentils regularly would probably be accused of running a chaotic household. As the stew simmers, you slice cucumbers. Their cool, crisp texture feels like a blessing in the heat. You hand a few slices to the children. They crunch loudly. One child pretends the cucumber slice is a miniature boat. Another pretends theirs is a tiny shield. You sigh fondly. Dinner and playtime are always intertwined. You return to the fire and gently loosen the fish from the cooking surface. The herbs have crisped beautifully. The skin is golden. The smell makes even you hungry. You arrange everything on the reed. Mat, bread, fish, lentil stew, herbs, cucumbers, and the egg you set aside earlier, now boiled in a small clay cup. You step back for a moment. It's not a feast. It's not extravagant. But it's nourishment. It's the kind of meal that families have eaten for thousands of years along the Nile. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian meals were eaten in strict family order or in more communal, casual style. But in your home, practicality wins. You call your children first. They sit cross-legged, wide-eyed, waiting impatiently for their share. Your oldest helps serve, placing bread and cucumbers in the smallest hands. Soon, everyone is eating. The courtyard fills with crunching, slurping laughter, and the occasional, "Hey, that was mine." You step in with your classic parenting line. There is enough for everyone, and everyone knows you're lying. But it helps maintain peace. When the children settle into satisfied munching, you finally sit down and take your first bite of bread. Warm, chewy, perfect. You eat slowly, letting the flavours of herbs and fish linger on your tongue. You drink a small cup of beer, thick, milky, earthy, refreshing in its own odd way. For a moment the world feels peaceful. Sun lowering, breeze cooling, family fed, fire crackling gently. You wipe your hands on a cloth and exhale softly. Another meal completed, another day's strength restored, and as you gather the empty bowls and brush crumbs from the mat, the evening begins to stir around you, quietly preparing its own challenges. The last crumbs of bread are brushed from small hands, the fish bones buried discreetly for tomorrow's chicken feast, and the lentil pot rinsed with a careful swirl of water. With everyone fed and the afternoon heat finally easing, you move into one of the most invisible, but absolutely essential parts of your day, helping neighbours constantly, not occasionally, not when you feel like it, constantly. Because in ancient Egypt, survival is a team sport, and your team includes half the village, 3 goats, 1 suspicious donkey, and a woman who always borrows your baskets and never returns them until you physically go fetch them. You step into the courtyard and barely make it 3 steps before your neighbour Henaneh waves frantically from her doorway. "Can you help? My grinding stone is stuck again." Again. Of course, you follow her inside. Her home looks like yours. Mud brick walls, reed mats, a scattering of tools and jars, but with a unique twist. She has exactly 3 chickens that are convinced they own the place. One marches proudly across the floor as though making a formal inspection. You crouch beside the grinding stone. She wasn't exaggerating. It's wedged at an awkward angle, refusing to budge. You press your palms against it, rocking gently, feeling the stone's weight shift. After a short wrestle, it loosens with a satisfying thunk. Henaneh beams. She offers you a handful of figs in "Thanks." A mainstream historical fact. Egyptian households leaned heavily on neighbourly cooperation. Tools, food, labour, childcare, and even animals were often shared. One family might own a good pot, another might own a boat, another might have a better grinding stone. It wasn't charity, it was the entire economic backbone of community life. You head outside again, figs in hand. Before you can even pop one into your mouth, a teenager from the house next door jogs over. "Can you help my mother with the loom? The warp is tangled." You follow him, ducking into the dim room where his mother sits surrounded by threads that look like a defeated spiderweb. She gives you a tired smile, the universal smile of, "I've been trying to fix this for an hour and I'm about to throw the loom into the Nile." You kneel and begin separating the threads gently, your fingers moving with the confidence of a woman who has untangled more string than the gods intended. You explain the trick. Pull from the bottom, not the side. She nods, watching carefully. Historians still argue whether weaving knowledge spread through formal instruction or through casual neighbour-to-neighbour teaching. But scenes like this make the answer obvious. Skills spread because women shared them freely. One loom problem solved, one skill passed on, one tiny bond strengthened. You return home only to find your yard invaded by 3 children who are definitely not yours, sitting in the shade, eating your cucumbers and petting your thoroughly offended goat. You raise an eyebrow. They freeze. Then one says, "Our mother went to the river. She told us to stay where someone can see us. Someone is you. Congratulations." You give them water and shoo them gently toward your sycamore tree. Your goat stares at them with deep concern. You pat the goat reassuringly. She tries to eat your sleeve. Friendship is complicated. Then your neighbour Dedu calls from across the path. He's carrying a broken reed basket with a gaping hole in the bottom. "Can you spare a strip of reed?" he asks. "Only if you promise not to let your donkey chew it this time." He laughs sheepishly. "No promises." You fetch a strip from your repairs pile and weave it quickly through the broken section. He thanks you profusely and hands you a small jar of date paste in return. Sweet, sticky, delicious. The kind of gift that makes you forget about his donkey entirely. A quirky tidbit leaps into your mind. Archaeologists have found letters from ancient villages where people loaned tools, traded chores, and even shared emotional advice. One famed letter shows a woman scolding her friend for not visiting enough, accusing her of loving others more. Proof that neighbour drama is eternal. You sit for a moment under the sycamore as the children, yours and borrowed, run circles around the goat. The air is cooler now, almost pleasant. You nibble a fig from Henaneh. Sweet, soft, perfect. But rest is brief. The sound of pottery shattering rings out from a few houses away. You get up immediately, because that sound can mean 2 things, a dropped jar or an upset household. You arrive to find your friend Mary standing over a broken water jug, hands on her hips, glaring at her teenage son who is desperately sweeping shards with a palm leaf. You offer to help. Mary groans, half laughing, half exasperated, and accepts. You gather the broken pieces, sweep the remaining dust, and help secure a temporary jar for the family until they can buy a new one. In return, Mary insists you take a handful of garlic bulbs. You try to refuse. She shoves them into your hands anyway. Friendship. Historians still argue whether community bonds were formalized or simply organic, but your day proves the truth. Mutual support is the social glue. Helping neighbors isn't optional. It's reciprocal survival. Today's help might be tomorrow's rescue. By the time you return home, the sun is dipping low. The sky has begun to soften into hues of peach and gold. Your own children run up, excited to show you something. A pile of stones arranged in a perfect circle. A mini shrine, they say proudly. You smile, touched. Neighbors wave goodnight as they pass by. Some carry bundles of straw, others lead goats. A few pass with baskets balanced on their heads. Each one nods to you, little acknowledgements of the weaving you've done today, not on a loom but across the community. You look around your village, the mud brick homes glowing warm in the sunset, the dusty paths, the children playing, the comforting hum of shared life. Your day has been full, and you've touched half the households along this stretch of river. Another small kindness offered, another small kindness received, and now, with the sky turning deeper and the fire slowing to embers, the evening calls you toward its quieter tasks. The sun continues its slow slide toward the horizon, painting the village in soft amber and stretching long shadows across the ground. Evening in ancient Egypt arrives not abruptly, but like a gentle hand placed on your shoulder, steady, calming, and quietly insistent. This is when you shift from community helper back into the keeper of your home's final tasks. Evening repairs and crafting. You step into your courtyard, where the last warm glow of daylight touches the walls. The children are still buzzing with energy, chasing each other in chaotic loops, while your goat watches them with an expression that can only be described as deep concern mixed with judgment. The chickens hop onto their roosting branch, still muttering dramatically about the day's events. Everything is settling, except you. Your evening work is only beginning. You gather your tools from the small wooden shelf. A reed-wrapped needle case, a coil of thread, a small knife, a few broken baskets, and a bundle of torn linen garments. Egyptians didn't throw things away lightly. Every item, every bowl, every mat, every tunic was repaired until time or wear finally defeated it. Glue didn't exist as we know it. Sewing, knotting, weaving, patching, these were your glues, and tonight your hands will be very busy. You sit under the sycamore tree as the air cools and a faint breeze stirs the dust. You start with the simplest item, the torn linen strip from your toddler's dress. The tear runs along the seam, easily fixable. You thread the needle, knot the end, and begin stitching. Over under, over under. The fabric glides beneath your fingers, smooth and familiar. Linen is forgiving in small tears, but stubborn in large ones. This one behaves well, like it feels guilty for adding to your workload. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. Linen was expensive and labor-intensive to produce. Even humble families treasured their garments, repairing them repeatedly. Archaeologists have found linen pieces with dozens of patch layers, like fabric time capsules telling quiet stories of wear, washing, and care. You glance at your child's patched sleeve. You've added many layers to that story yourself. Once the dress is mended, you turn to the reed baskets you patched hastily during the day. Baskets are the backbone of storage, carrying everything from grain to tools to fish. But reed fibers dry, crack and split. You weave new strips into weak gaps, tightening each loop with a thumb twist and soft click. It's satisfying work, order being restored one strand at a time. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Egyptians used woven baskets for everything, including carrying newborn babies, storing makeup, transporting bread, holding crops, and even organizing tomb goods. Entire industries revolved around basketry, and here you are, continuing that tradition with tired hands and fading daylight. As you finish reinforcing the basket rims, your eldest daughter appears beside, you holding a cracked toy, one of the rare household treasures. It's a small clay horse, worn smooth from being carried everywhere. One leg is chipped. You smile at her and take it gently. Clay toys weren't luxury items, but children didn't have many possessions. Fixing this one matters. You take a sticky mixture of mud, crushed straw, and a touch of honey, your universal clay repair paste, and smooth it over the crack. The horse now looks like it trotted through a swamp, but when it dries, it'll hold. Your daughter beams, hugging the toy with a fierce loyalty only a child can muster. Next, you reach for your weaving repair. One of your mats, used constantly for sitting, has frayed at the edges. You pull it across your lap, examine the worn spots, and begin reweaving the papyrus and reed strands. The mat rustles softly, bending beneath your fingers. You replace broken fibers with new ones, blending them so seamlessly no one will notice the difference unless they're looking closely. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian household repairs were predominantly women's work, or whether men also helped. But judging by the line of children lined up to hand you broken things, today's reality is clear. The repair department is firmly under your jurisdiction. The sky shifts into deeper gold, then rose, then violet. The light fades with every stitch. You light a small clay lamp beside you, just enough glow to keep working. The flame flickers, casting warm shadows that dance across the courtyard walls. You gather the evening's tools again and turn to the final project, crafting small items. Tonight it's a new reed scoop for measuring grain. You split a bundle of reeds, soften them with water, bend them into shape, and bind them with cord. The scoop takes form slowly, a small practical object born from patient hands. You pause occasionally to glance at your children, who now sit in a circle playing with shells and dust drawings. Your heart softens. Evenings in Egypt don't bring bright electric lights or screens, but they bring quiet moments, shared breath, and the comfort of family settling into stillness. As you finish the scoop, a neighbour calls softly from over the fence, "Do you have a spare thread?" You hand her a spool without hesitation. She thanks you, promising to return it tomorrow, knowing full well neither of you will remember which spool belonged to whom. But that's the rhythm of this place. Tools circulate, materials flow, repairs are community efforts. You sit back finally, letting your hands rest on your lap. The courtyard glows warmly in the lamplight. The reed mat beneath you feels smooth and newly strengthened. The mended dress hangs neatly nearby. The baskets stand sturdier than they were this morning. The tiny clay horse waits patiently to dry. This quiet evening craftsmanship is what keeps your household functional. It's the kind of work no one praises, no one writes poems about, no one immortalizes on temple walls, but without it nothing would last. Not clothes, not tools, not mats, not stability. You exhale deeply, feeling both tired and oddly fulfilled. The last light of day fades. Night begins to gather at the edges of the village, and with repairs complete you listen for the next whisper of responsibility waiting in the darkening air. Night drifts closer, deepening the shadows between homes and painting the village with that soft blue dusk that makes everything feel both peaceful and slightly uncanny. This is the time of day when the world slows, but your thoughts sharpen. Because as you move from physical chores into the quiet of evening, you enter the realm of old beliefs, new fears, the spiritual undercurrent of ancient Egyptian life that hums beneath every task, every choice, every breath. You carry a small clay bowl inside. Your newly finished grain scoop rests beside it, and place them on the storage shelf. The house feels different now. Lower light, cooler air, quiet corners, whispers of the unknown. Even the children drop their voices as night approaches, as though darkness has its own set of rules everyone instinctively respects. Egyptians never fully separated the physical from the spiritual. To them, the world was crowded with invisible forces, protective deities, mischievous spirits, wandering ghosts, symbolic animals, signs from dreams, omens hiding in shadows. Some were comforting, some were decidedly not. You've grown up navigating these unseen currents like a second language. You sit on the reed mat and run your thumbs slowly across your bead necklace, each small stone worn from years of quiet handling. This necklace isn't fancy, it's not gold or faience, but it has been blessed at a festival, touched by a priest, and whispered over by your mother. It is protection in physical form. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Egyptians wore amulets constantly, ankhs, eyes, scarabs, knots, animal shapes, each one holding symbolic power. These weren't decorations, they were shields, talismans, lifelines in a world full of uncertainties. You glance at the amulets woven into your children's clothes. They are small, but they matter. Tonight, as the air cools, you feel that familiar flicker of awareness, something subtle shifting as the sun surrenders fully to night. Not fear exactly, just cautious respect. You light a second clay lamp, one dedicated to Bez, the dwarf god known for scaring away evil spirits with his ugly, fearsome face and his extremely loud personality. You smile at his carved image on the wall. Watch the children, you murmuring, especially the one who tries to eat dirt. Outside, a dog barks once, sharp, quick, a reminder that nighttime belongs to different creatures. A wind rustles through the courtyard, bringing with it the earthy scent of river mud and distant reeds. The breeze makes your linen curtain puff open, then fall back again. Strange how such a small movement can make you imagine spirits slipping through doorways. Historians still argue whether Egyptians feared the dark itself or simply respected the beings associated with it, those who wandered the unseen worlds. You lean toward the latter. Darkness is natural. It's the unknown inside the darkness that makes your heart beat a little faster. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some Egyptians believed the night was filled with roaming spirits called Aku, luminous and unpredictable. Others thought scorpions were the physical manifestations of angry forces, requiring prayers to Serket, the scorpion goddess, to keep them at bay. You glance cautiously into the corners of your home, just in case one of the angry forces has legs and a stinger tonight. Your eldest daughter comes to sit beside you, clutching her little clay horse. "Mama," she whispers, "I dreamed today. Should I tell you?" Dreams are important, powerful, sometimes warnings, sometimes nonsense, sometimes messages from gods or ancestors. Egyptians took dreams seriously enough to write manuals about interpreting them. "Yes," you say gently. "Tell me." She describes a dream about a giant cat walking through the sky. You nod thoughtfully. Cats are symbols of protection, linked to Bastet. A sky cat dream likely means safety, or a desire for more milk. Hard to tell. You kiss her forehead and assure her the dream is good. Her small shoulders relax. Then your middle child wanders in with a piece of string tied in a knot. "Look," they whisper proudly, "magic knot." You examine it with proper seriousness. The knot resembles the Tayet, the knot of Isis, symbol of life and protection. Maybe accidental, maybe intuitive, maybe something more. Either way, you hang it near the doorway with care. Your children, without realizing it, are already weaving themselves into the world of symbols you inhabit. The house dims as the last streaks of sunlight vanish. You adjust the lamp and sit close to its glow, your face warm, your arms cool. This is when old fears resurface, the ones you grew up hearing whispered by your mother, who heard them from hers. Don't whistle at night. Don't point at stars. Don't leave water uncovered after sunset. Don't sleep with your feet toward the doorway. Little things, but deeply rooted. You follow them without question, not because you truly believe disaster will strike, but because the rituals feel like threads tying your family safely into the world. You walk through the house slowly, touching the walls lightly, feeling the mud bricks' cool texture. You check the children's sleeping mats, their amulets, the doors. Everything is normal, familiar, grounded. Yet you can't ignore that under the familiar rhythm of your home lies a deeper truth. Life here is fragile. One illness, one flood, one snake hiding in warm corners could shift everything. These ancient beliefs, practices, charms, rituals help carve out Akai's sense of safety in a world ruled by unpredictable forces. And tonight, with the lamps flickering and the evening deepening into quiet blue, you let those beliefs settle into your bones like a soft shield. You sit once more, listening to the distant frogs at the riverbank, the soft rustle of papyrus leaves, the murmur of children settling under their blankets. Night thickens gently around you, not threatening, simply vast. And as you breathe in the cool air, you prepare yourself for the rituals of safety that follow, the ones that guard your home through the dark hours. Night settles fully over the village now, draping everything in deep blues and soft shadows. The final glow along the horizon fades, leaving your home illuminated only by the warm, trembling light of clay lamps. This shift into darkness brings a subtle tension, not fear exactly, but awareness. Because this is when you shift into nightfall safety rituals, the quiet routines that protect your family, your animals, your food, and your peace from all the things that wander, creep, or stir after sunset. You rise slowly from the reed mat, joints clicking softly. The air has cooled, the heat of the day finally releasing its grip. But with that relief comes a different kind of vulnerability. The night in ancient Egypt belongs to insects, prowling animals, thieves, restless spirits, according to some, and troublemakers of all varieties. You begin with the door. It isn't a wooden slab like in later centuries, just a thick woven mat that hangs from a beam, or a hinged wood frame if you're lucky. You lift it, shake out the dust and settle it firmly into place. You slide a locking bar across the inside, a simple wooden latch but effective enough. You touch it once, twice, testing its grip. Good. Secure. One small barrier between your sleeping family and the unpredictable world beyond. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. Egyptians placed enormous importance on protection during the night. They believed darkness was when harmful forces, physical and spiritual, were most active. Homes used amulets, protective carvings, spells, and physical barriers to guard against danger. Night was a test, and families survived it through preparation. You cross the room and check the corners for pests. Spiders? Expected. Lizards? Helpful. They eat insects. Scorpions? Entirely unwelcome. You turn over the dried palm fronds and lift the basket lids carefully. Tonight, everything looks clear. You thank whichever god feels responsible. As you inspect the floor, your cat slinks out from behind a jar, tail high, eyes glowing the way only cat's eyes can glow in lamplight, as if holding ancient secret knowledge. You kneel and scratch behind its ears. "Guard our grain," you whisper. The cat accepts its sacred duty with a slow blink. Then you check the children's sleeping mats. You smooth the linen coverings, untangle small amulets, push aside toys that might become nighttime trip hazards, and make sure no one's feet are pointed toward the doorway, because your mother drilled that rule into you so deeply you still feel the need to obey it. You tuck in the smallest child, who mumbles something about a giant sky cat from their dream earlier. You smile and kiss their cheek. Your next ritual is lighting the protective lamp. You carry a small lamp etched with the face of Bes, the dwarf guardian god of households. His wide eyes and protruding tongue might look strange to outsiders, but to you, he is comfort, a chaotic, loud, protective force who chases away both nightmares and nighttime dangers. You place the lamp in the darkest corner of the room where shadows gather thickest. You light it with 3 controlled breaths. The flame jumps alive, pushing darkness outward in flickering pulses. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Egyptians believed that lamps weren't just for illumination. They warded off malevolent forces and wandering spirits. Darkness wasn't empty. It was crowded. Light kept unwelcome beings at bay. You don't necessarily believe every bedtime story your grandmother told, but you also don't test fate. You step outside into the courtyard one last time before fully retreating inside. The night air cools your skin instantly. The moon hangs low, casting a pale shimmer across the Nile in the distance. The world is quieter now, though not silent. Frogs croak from the riverbanks. A donkey brays once, indignant. Someone far away laughs too loudly, the sound echoing across clay walls. You check on your animals one by one. The chickens sit puffed up on their roosting branches, eyes half open, alert even in rest. You close their pen with a firm wooden peg. The ducks nestle in a round huddle near the water basin. You place a small stone near the entrance of their enclosure, an old superstition meant to block bad spirits from slipping through gaps. Your goat stands silently near the fence, breathing calmly for once, giving you a look that says, "Everything is fine, but also feed me." You pat her gently and check her tether. Secure. Historians still argue whether nightly animal checks were practical or symbolic, probably both. A loose pen door means predators. A forgotten rope could lead to escape. But layering that with rituals, stones, gestures, whispered blessings, made families feel doubly protected. Now the last step, sprinkling a circle of water. You dip your fingers into your jar of cool Nile water and flick droplets in a loose circle around the sleeping area. Just a few drops, barely visible, but symbolically powerful. Water purifies, cleanses, seals. It's an old tradition, older than your grandmother, older than most of the stories you know. You whisper a soft protective phrase as you sprinkle. Keep harm outside, keep peace inside. The children watch you with heavy eyes. Even the youngest knows this ritual. It's part of the rhythm of their lives. You return indoors, lower the curtain, doorway behind you, and take one last careful glance around your home. Lamps glowing, doors latched, amulets in place, children safe, animals secure. Night allowed in, but not allowed to touch. You sit on your mat for a moment, listening. The night hums with its layered sounds, crickets, soft winds, distant river currents. You feel both small and deeply connected to the vastness around you. Night in Egypt is beautiful, mysterious, alive, but also demanding of respect. And now, held by the gentle glow of your lamps and the weight of your rituals, the village breathes into stillness. You rise slowly, moving into the final tasks before sleep, knowing that even in the calm, the day isn't over just yet. With the night finally settled and the safety rituals complete, a gentle stillness settles over your home, one that feels earned after a day stitched together by chores, heat, noise, and small crises. This is the softest part of your daily rhythm. Stories before sleep, a time when the world finally loosens its grip, and your voice becomes the bridge between wakefulness and dreams. You lower yourself onto the reed mat, the fibres pressing gently into your skin. The clay lamps flicker, casting warm amber halos that sway across the mud brick walls. The air smells faintly of cooling herbs, leftover bread, and the last curls of incense from earlier. Your children gather around you automatically, drawn as if by gravity. They settle beside you, one leaning against your arm, another curling into your lap, the smallest climbing directly onto your knees like a tiny but determined cat. This moment happens every night, a ritual as dependable as the rising sun, even if your eyelids insist on sliding downward like stubborn temple doors. But no matter how heavy you feel, you tell the stories. Because stories are more than entertainment here. They're glue. They hold families together. They carry wisdom. They soothe fears. They are the lullabies of an entire civilization. Your oldest child asks, "Mama, tell the one about the princess with the magic sandals." Your middle child immediately interrupts, "No, tell the crocodile one." The smallest simply says, "Horse," pointing at the just-repaired clay toy drying nearby. You chuckle. You choose a story that contains a little of everything. Princess, crocodile, horse. Efficiency is a mother's greatest talent. You begin softly, your voice a gentle murmur that blends with the night air. Long ago, when the Nile was young and the stars still argued about where they belonged in the sky, there lived a brave princess who wore sandals made of gold. But not just any gold. Gold that could glow in the moonlight, showing her the safe paths even when the night was very, very dark. The children lean in closer. Storytime magic begins. A mainstream historical fact floats into your narrative without effort. Egyptians loved storytelling. Tales of gods, animals, magical journeys, moral lessons, and heroic deeds were passed through generations. Some were written on papyrus scrolls, others lived only in whispered nights like this one. A famous example is the tale of two brothers, filled with transformation, betrayal, magic, and triumph. Proof that humans have always loved drama. As you continue your story, you weave in familiar creatures. A wise crocodile guards the river, not with sharp teeth, but with gentle warnings. A loyal horse carries the princess across dangerous marshes. A mischievous monkey tries to steal one of the glowing sandals. Your children giggle loudly at this, and accidentally becomes her companion instead. You exaggerate your expressions, widening your eyes at dramatic moments, whispering conspiratorially when magic appears, and making your voice deep and slow when the crocodile speaks. The children are enthralled. Even your goat tied nearby watches with mild curiosity. Your cat, unimpressed, curls into a ball and goes to sleep. You gently adjust the tone now, letting the story soften and slow. This is the secret technique. Egyptian mothers have used it for thousands of years. Start lively, then let your voice grow warm, heavy, rhythmic, until the story itself becomes a lullaby. Then the princess reached the place where the stars touched the river. You continue, your voice low, and she pressed her sandals into the soft mud. and the stars whispered to her, the way they whisper to all brave souls, guiding her safely home. You pause. You look down. 2 children are already asleep. The third fights it valiantly, blinking in slow motion, losing the battle with every breath. You stroke their hair gently. A quirky tidbit rises in your mind. Egyptians believed that dreams were doorways, not metaphors, literal doorways between worlds. A dream could bring messages from gods, warnings from ancestors, glimpses of the future. Children were thought to be especially receptive. You glance at your sleeping little ones and wonder what worlds they'll wander into tonight. Outside, someone whistles softly, a tune drifting across the village like a lullaby left in the hands of the breeze. A dog barks once in response, then silence. You continue the end of the story in a whisper, and when she returned, the princess placed her glowing sandals beside her bed, knowing the night would always hold mysteries, but she would never walk alone. Your last wakeful child exhales slowly, eyelids fluttering shut. You stay still for a moment, letting your own breath match theirs. Deep, slow, peaceful. Historians still argue whether bedtime rituals were structured or spontaneous in ancient Egypt. But looking at your sleeping children, their faces illuminated by warm lamplight, you know the truth. Whatever shape the day took, every family found its way to these quiet moments of closeness. You brush a stray curl from your daughter's forehead. The glow from the lamp softens her features, turning her into a tiny statue of serenity. These are the fleeting seconds that keep your heart anchored through all the labour, heat and noise. You lay them gently onto their mats, adjusting their linen coverings, tucking the little amulets beneath their hands. Their breathing deepens. The home feels warm, safe, cocooned by the rituals you performed, the stories you told, the lamps you lit. And as you rise quietly, extinguishing all but one small lamp, you prepare yourself for the final tasks in the dark. Those last quiet moments that close the day like the final knot in a long woven thread. The children sleep now, soft bundles of warmth curled beneath thin linen sheets, their breaths rising and falling in gentle rhythms that soothe the room, like a quiet tide. Only one lamp remains lit, its flame flickering with slow, comforting pulses. This is the last stretch of your day, the quiet descent into darkness, where you finally face the final tasks in the dark, the small, necessary motions that close your world one careful piece at a time. You move softly, your feet whispering across the packed earth floor. The night air cools your skin, slipping around your shoulders like a light shawl. Outside, the village hums faintly, some homes already silent, others still murmuring with last-minute conversations or the scraping of bowls being stacked. A donkey sighs dramatically in the distance. Somewhere near the river, frogs croak in uneven, sleepy rhythms. You start by banking the fire. Embers glow beneath thin ash like tiny scattered suns. Too much flame, and you risk stirring sparks in the night. Too little, and tomorrow morning becomes a struggle. So you kneel and adjust the ash carefully, shaping it over the embers until they dim into a gentle red glow. Enough warmth to keep, not enough to wander. You nod to yourself. The fire understands its boundaries. Then you gather the last of your tools, needle, thread, the half-finished reed scoop, the mended basket, and place them neatly on the shelf. Today's repairs are complete. Tomorrow's will appear without asking. You wipe your hands on your dress and exhale with a slow release, your shoulders finally dropping from the long day's weight. You step outside once more, carrying the tiny clay lamp to check the courtyard. Night has transformed it. Shadows stretch in soft drifts. Tree leaves sway with secretive murmurs, and the ground cools fast beneath your bare feet. You check the animals again with gentle movements. The chickens shift sleepily, feathers rustling faintly. The ducks nestle tightly in their huddle. The goat, for once, dozes peacefully, her breath soft and rhythmic. You whisper, "Good night," because even animals in this world seem to appreciate reassurance. A mainstream historical fact crosses your mind as you turn. Egyptians often ended their nights with small rituals of gratitude, tiny offerings, quiet moments of reflection, a whispered thanks to deities or ancestors. Life was fragile. Gratitude was insurance. So you pause beside the sycamore tree, touch its rough bark, and offer a silent acknowledgement for shade, protection, and the dozens of tiny ways it has supported you today. The lamplight flickers across the tree trunk, casting gentle, moving shadows. You turn back toward the house. Inside, the children sleep soundly. You walk softly around them, checking their coverings, adjusting their amulets, smoothing their hair. Your smallest one curls a hand toward you, fingers opening and closing as if reaching for reassurance even in dreams. You kneel, press a kiss to their forehead, and rest your palm lightly on their back until their breathing steadies again. Then the final household tasks call. You secure the pottery lids, check the grain jars, tighten the knot of the curtain door, and sweep a thin line of dust away from the threshold. Not for cleanliness. Cleaning can wait until morning. This line is symbolic, part of the nightly practice to brush away the old day's worries, a small ritual gesture that feels more protective than logical. A quirky tidbit slips into your memory. Some Egyptians believed shadowy spirits could slip beneath doors unless the floor was swept outward each night. Another reason this soft sweeping has become your final motion of the day. The last lamp flickers low. You pinch the wick gently, but leave it glowing. Bess's lamp stays on through the night. A guardian's flame, small but steadfast. You stretch your arms slowly, rolling your shoulders to release the tightness woven into them since dawn. Your body feels warm, heavy, earned. The day's labour has shaped your muscles, your breath, your heartbeat. But the softness of night wraps around you now, smoothing the sharp edges of tiredness into something calmer, almost tender. You lay down on your mat at last. The room is dim and warm. Your children sleep near you. The walls hum faintly as the night wind brushes against them. Your cat curls beside your legs, purring softly, a rhythmic reassurance that you are safe. They are safe, and the world is, for now, quiet. You pull a light linen cloth over yourself, inhaling deeply. The scent is faintly smoky, earthy, familiar. Your eyes grow heavy. Before sleep claims you, you allow yourself one final thought, the kind that only surfaces at the very end of the day. You survived it. Another day of heat, labour, noise, tasks, rituals, small joys, and constant motion. Another day of care given, work completed, fires tended, children guided, neighbours helped, stories told. And as your breathing slows, as the lamp's glow softens into gold and then into stillness, you drift gently towards sleep, carried by the same rhythms that have cradled countless women across thousands of years along the Nile. The day softens now, melting into the quiet embrace of deep night, and you allow your breath to lengthen, slow and unhurried. Your body, tired from work but warm with purpose, sinks deeper into the mat beneath you. With each exhale, the last threads of dust and effort unwind from your muscles. There is nothing left to do, nothing waiting, nothing calling for your attention. The clay walls around you hold the day's final warmth, releasing it in gentle waves. The faint crackle of a dying ember murmurs from the hearth, not demanding anything, just offering a soft reminder that you have tended well to your home. The lamp beside you flickers once, twice, then steadies, its light stretching into long, calm shadows that sway like reeds on the river. Imagine the sound of distant water now, the Nile drifting under moonlight, unhurried and smooth. Feel its slow rhythm echo through your breath, its cool surface guiding your thoughts into a quiet glide. Let your mind loosen from the details of the day, the weaving, the cooking, the walking beneath the heat. Let each memory float away gently, as if carried downriver on small boats made of light. You've done enough, more than enough, and now the world asks nothing of you except to rest. The air cools around you, brushing softly against your face like a whisper of night wind through lotus petals. Your hands unclench, your shoulders settle. Your breath becomes a slow tide, rising and falling with easy grace. The village lies quiet beyond your doorway, wrapped in the same peace settling over your home. The stars above blink softly, patient and distant, watching over your sleep just as even the smallest amulet tucked beneath your pillow does. Close your eyes now. Let the day drift away. Let the quiet carry you.